My parents pressured me into babysitting my nephew for free, so I moved out, and what I did next left them regretting everything. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one in my family. It's not something I chose. It's something that was quietly handed to me like a family heirloom nobody else wanted. While most people my age were figuring out who they were, I was figuring out how to keep the lights on and make sure my parents didn't fall behind on bills. I work full-time at a small logistics company. Nothing glamorous. But it's steady. Every paycheck, a portion goes toward the mortgage, another toward groceries, and whatever's left, I save. My parents call it helping out, but sometimes it feels more like I'm a safety net they never planned for. Still, I tell myself it's family, and family takes care of each other, right? My sister Lily doesn't see it that way. She's 30, married, and just had a baby. My parents talk about her like she's a saint, as if motherhood made her untouchable. Every phone call is about how hard Lily's working or how beautiful the baby is. Meanwhile, I'm the one unclogging sinks, paying car insurance, and fixing the old heater at midnight. Sometimes she visits, usually just long enough to dump a basket of laundry and eat. Dinner before leaving again? Mom beams at her, saying things like, "You're such a good mother." While I'm standing there with dish soap on my hands, invisible, Dad just nods along, proud of his daughter, proud of her life. I don't say anything. I just keep working, keep paying, keep doing what I've always done. Because somewhere deep down, I still believe that one day they'll see it. They'll see me. Maybe they'll even say, "We're proud of you too." But lately, that hope feels smaller, like a candle flickering in a room that keeps getting darker. It was a Saturday morning when Lily showed up at the house, her husband trailing behind with their baby carrier. I was halfway through fixing the kitchen sink when she waltzed in. Perfume strong enough to fill the room, voice sweet as honey. "Hey, little brother," she said. The same way people talk when they're about to ask for something big. They sat at the table exchanging glances. Lily gave one of those tired mom sighs and said, "We've been so overwhelmed lately. Work, the baby, it's been nonstop." Her husband nodded along like a backup singer. Then she looked at me. "We were wondering if you could help out for a few days. Just babysit while we get some things sorted out." I froze, wrench still in hand. "A few days?" I repeated, already knowing what was coming. Before I could even think it through, Mom jumped in. "Of course he can. You're home most evenings anyway," Dad chimed in with. "It's family, son. You help where you're needed." I wanted to say no to remind them that I work full-time. I barely sleep as it is, but their eyes were already on me, expectant, judging. The silence stretched until guilt filled it. So I nodded. "Yeah, sure. A few days?" Lily's face lit up, relief disguised as gratitude. "You're the best, really," she said, already gathering her things like she'd won. Within an hour, they were gone. The house fell quiet, except for the soft whimpering of my nephew in his crib. I looked at the baby, then at my parents, smiling proudly like I'd done something heroic. But inside, I felt that old, familiar heaviness, like I'd been handed another responsibility no one else wanted. I told myself it was only temporary. Just a few days. I didn't know then that a few days was a lie. A comfortable lie my family was all too willing to tell. The first few days were manageable. My nephew was tiny, barely a few months old, and I told myself this was my way of being a good uncle. I'd rock him to sleep after work, feed him formula, and try not to mind the exhaustion creeping in. But by the end of the first week, something felt off. Lily wasn't calling to check in. My parents kept brushing off my questions with, "She's busy, sweetheart. Be patient." One evening, I came home from work to find Mom already holding the baby. Lily called. She said, "They're staying a bit longer. Work's crazy." I blinked. "A bit longer? How long is a bit?" She avoided eye contact. "Just until things settle." Things never settled. Every morning, I'd rush from my job straight into diaper duty. Every night, I'd collapse on the couch, barely able to eat dinner. When I mentioned being exhausted, Dad said, "You think your sister doesn't get tired? At least you don't have to deal with a crying baby 24/7." The irony burned in my chest. Lily would occasionally text casual, cheerful messages like, "Thanks again, you're a lifesaver." As if she'd lent me a plant to water, not her infant son. Weeks blurred together. My social life vanished, my work performance slipped, and my friends stopped inviting me out because I always said no. One night, holding the baby at 2 a.m., I looked around the dark living room, empty bottles. Laundry, silence, except for the baby's soft hiccups. I realized I wasn't helping anymore. I was being used still every time I thought about saying no. My parents' voices echoed in my head, "Family helps family." That phrase felt like a leash around my neck. I told myself I could endure it a little longer, just until Lily came back. But deep down, I already knew she wasn't coming back anytime soon. It was a Wednesday afternoon when my boss called me into his office. He wasn't angry, just tired. "You've been late 4 times this week," he said, his voice low. "You're distracted, missing deadlines. That's not like you." I wanted to tell him the truth, that I was practically raising my sister's baby, while my parents cheered her from the sidelines, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded and promised to get it together. That night I came home to find Mom in the kitchen, humming while I held my nephew. I tried to explain what happened, that my job was on the line, but before I could finish, she said, "You're overreacting. Your sister needs help right now. She's struggling." "Mom," I said slowly, fighting to stay calm, "I'm struggling too." Dad looked up from the TV. "You don't have a family of your own. You can handle it." His words hit harder than he realized. That was their excuse because I was single. My time didn't matter. I felt my chest tighten. "I'm not her nanny. I can't keep doing this." Lily called right then, her voice casual and chipper. "Hey, just checking in. Everything good? You're amazing, by the way." Something snapped. "Lily, you said a few days. It's been a month. When are you coming back?" She laughed, a dismissive, mocking sound. "Relax. You'll love that kid. You're doing great." And then she hung up. I stood there in silence, heart pounding, hands trembling as the baby started to cry again. My parents looked at me like I was the problem for raising my voice, for breaking the illusion that everything was fine that night. While pacing the floor with my nephew in my arms, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource. And something inside me started to shift. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness I couldn't shake. The baby was finally asleep, the house was quiet, and for the first time in weeks, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched coffee. I realized I couldn't keep living like this, half a parent, half a son, completely invisible. That's when the idea hit me. I needed to leave. Not just for a break, but for good. I started small. Late at night, after everyone was asleep, I'd scroll through rental listings on my phone, tiny studios, barely furnished apartments, anything that felt like freedom. My savings weren't much, but I could make it work. A coworker named Jared noticed the dark circles under my eyes and finally asked, "Man, are you okay?" I almost brushed it off, but something cracked open. I told him everything, how I was basically raising my nephew. While my family guilt-tripped me into silence, he didn't even hesitate. "You need out. I know a guy renting a small place, cheap, clean, quiet. You'd finally get your life back." That night, I packed slowly, starting with the small things, my clothes, old books, the watch my grandfather left me. I hid the boxes in my car trunk, pretending everything was normal. Every time I looked at my parents or thought about the baby, guilt clawed at me. They'd raised me to believe that leaving meant betrayal, but wasn't staying a betrayal too? A betrayal of myself? One evening, while rocking my nephew to sleep, I whispered, "You deserve better than this." "We both do." The baby cooed softly and something in me steadied. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't sure when or how I'd go, but the decision was made. I would leave this house, no matter what it cost me. I left before sunrise. The house was still, the air cold and heavy, the kind of silence that makes your heartbeat sound too loud. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, duffel bag slung over my shoulder, my car keys trembling in my hand. My parents' bedroom door was closed. My nephew slept soundly in the next room, a soft hum coming from the baby monitor. For a second, I almost turned back. But then I remembered the exhaustion, the guilt, the way they all looked at me like I was obligated to sacrifice myself. So, I left a note on the kitchen counter, short and careful. I love you all, but I need space. I can't keep doing this. Please understand. And I slipped out, locking the door behind me like I was sealing a chapter of my life. The drive to my new apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the engine. My hands shook, half from fear, half from freedom. When I finally parked, the morning sun hit the building. Old, faded bricks and peeling paint, but to me, it looked like peace. The studio was tiny, just one room, a mattress, and a cracked window that let in too much light. But it was mine. I dropped my bags, sat on the floor, and for the first time in months, I breathed without pressure, crushing my chest. My phone buzzed. 6 missed calls. 4 from Mom, 2 from Lily. Then came the messages. Mom, what have you done? Dad, come home right now. Lily, you can't just abandon us like this. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, but didn't reply. Not this time. That night I fell asleep to the sound of distant city traffic and my own quiet thoughts. For once, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. It didn't take long for the guilt to arrive, not from inside me, but from them. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of texts and missed calls. Mom had sent paragraph after paragraph, alternating between sorrow and fury. How could you walk out on your family? And we sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay us. By noon, there was a knock at my door. I froze, praying it was a delivery guy, but when I looked through the peephole, I saw them, Mom, Dad, both standing there like an intervention squad. I almost didn't open the door, but some part of me still couldn't ignore them, sweetheart. Mom started, her voice trembling. We're worried. You can't just disappear like that. Your sister is struggling, she needs you. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She's not struggling, Mom. She's dumping her responsibility on me. I was never supposed to be her babysitter. Dad's expression hardened. She's family. Family doesn't walk away when things get tough. Something inside me snapped. Then why is it always me who has to fix everything? Why do I have to sacrifice my job, my time, my sanity while she gets to struggle in peace? Mom's eyes filled with tears, the kind she used to win arguments. You've changed, she whispered. We didn't raise you to be so selfish. The word hit like a slap. I'd given up years of my life, my own dreams, just to be the good son. And now they called me selfish because I dared to stop. I'm done, I said quietly, but firmly. You can't keep using guilt to control me. I closed the door before they could answer. My hands were shaking, but my heart felt strangely light. For the first time, I didn't give in. Still, deep down, I knew this wasn't over. They weren't the kind of people who accepted no easily. The days that followed were eerily quiet. No calls, no knocks, just the hum of my small fridge and the occasional creak of my ceiling fan. I should have felt at peace, but instead, I was restless. Guilt was still there, crawling under my skin like an echo I couldn't silence. Every time I ate dinner alone, I imagined my parents frowning, my mom crying, my dad calling me ungrateful. At work, Jared noticed. You're still thinking about them, huh? He asked one evening as we closed up. I nodded, staring at the stack of invoices. They make me feel like I've committed a crime, I said quietly. He leaned on the counter. You didn't. You set a boundary, and they don't like it. That's not guilt. That's freedom trying to breathe. Something about that line stuck with me. Freedom trying to breathe? That night, I went home and did something small but symbolic. I turned off my phone. No buzzing, no guilt messages, no calls pretending to be love while demanding obedience. The silence felt pure. The next day, I took Jared's advice and met with someone he knew, a family lawyer. Not for a lawsuit, but for clarity. The lawyer explained how what my family had done, pressuring me into unpaid caretaking while threatening emotional punishment, wasn't just toxic, it bordered on exploitation. Hearing that felt like validation for every sleepless night and every tear I'd hidden. For the first time, I didn't feel crazy. I felt seen, so I blocked my family on every platform and focused on my job. I worked late, picked up extra hours, and slowly, I started feeling like me again. The weight I'd carried for years began to lift, piece by piece. But peace never lasts long when you come from a family that feeds on control. And just when I started to believe I was finally free, my phone rang from an unknown number. Something told me I shouldn't have answered. It was late evening when I answered that call. The voice on the other end was shaky Mom's. "Sweetheart," she said, breathless, "your father's in the hospital. He had chest pains. Please come quickly." Every instinct in me screamed, "Go!" Despite everything, he was still my dad. Within minutes, I was in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding harder than the rain on my windshield. I didn't even think, I just drove. When I got there, the hospital parking lot was nearly empty. I rushed inside, searching for the room number she'd given me. But when I reached it, I froze. There was no nurse, no doctor, no patient, just my parents sitting in 2 plastic chairs. Perfectly fine. Mom stood up, smiling in relief that didn't reach her eyes. "See, you do care," she said softly. The air left my lungs. "What is this?" Dad sighed, rubbing his forehead. "We had to do something. You've been ignoring us, ignoring your sister. You left us no choice." I stared at them, disbelief mixing with rage. "You faked a heart attack to get me here?" Mom's voice cracked. "We just needed to talk. You've turned cold. Lily's struggling, and you're abandoning your family." Something in me shattered then. All those years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the guilt, it all came crashing down. I whispered, "You lied to me. You manipulated me." Dad looked away. Mom reached out, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said, voice shaking. "You can't keep doing this to me." When I walked out of that hospital, I wasn't angry. I was empty. It felt like grief, like I was mourning people who were still alive that night. I sat in my apartment, staring at the ceiling until sunrise. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too drained to even feel. For the first time, I realized my family wasn't broken. They were toxic. And I wasn't their victim anymore. I was their escape plan that finally refused to work. The days after the hospital incident felt like waking up from a nightmare. Blurry. Disorienting, but strangely quiet. I didn't answer my parents' calls. I didn't text Lily back when she tried to guilt-trip me with lines like, "The baby misses you." I just stopped responding. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to their chaos. I was choosing silence. At work, I threw myself into projects, staying late, taking overtime, anything to keep my mind busy. The exhaustion that used to feel like a burden now felt like rebuilding, brick by brick. I was creating a new version of myself. Jared noticed the change. "You look lighter," he said one day, handing me coffee. "You finally sleep?" "Yeah," I said with a half smile. No baby crying, no guilt trips, no drama. I didn't mention the loneliness, the kind that creeps in at night when the quiet gets too loud. But I was learning to live with it. I started taking long walks after work. Earbuds in, city lights glowing off wet pavement. The cold air stung my face, but it made me feel alive. I even started cooking again, actual meals, not microwave leftovers, eaten over a crib. Then, word got around. A mutual friend of the family told me things weren't going well at home. Without me there, my parents were overwhelmed. Lily's marriage was cracking under pressure. Her husband had started complaining that she never took responsibility for anything. I should have felt sorry for them, but instead I felt clarity. They were finally facing the consequences of years of avoidance and entitlement. And for once, I wasn't their cushion. Still, a small voice in my head whispered, "What if they never change?" I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back to save them again. Not this time. It had been nearly 3 months since the hospital stunt when I got the invitation. A simple text from Mom. "Come home for dinner. Just to talk." I stared at the screen for a long time. Every instinct told me it was another trap, but something in me needed closure. I wasn't the same desperate son who'd once begged for validation. I wanted to face them, not for reconciliation, but for truth. That evening, I drove back to the house I'd spent years calling home. The moment I walked in, the smell of my mom's cooking hit me, familiar, comforting, and manipulative all at once. The dining table was set neatly, my parents sitting across from each other, trying to smile like we weren't fractured beyond repair. Mom started softly. "We've missed you. Things have been difficult without you here," I'm sure I said quietly. "That's kind of the point, isn't it?" Dad frowned. "Watch your tone. We just want to make peace." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "Peace isn't what you want. You want control. You want me back under your roof so you can use me again to babysit, to fix, to sacrifice?" Mom's face crumpled. "That's not fair." "No," I interrupted. "What's not fair is how you treated me like a tool instead of a son. I lost my job security, my health, and my sanity trying to please you. You called me selfish when I finally chose myself. You faked a heart attack just to get me back." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's tears fell quietly. Dad's jaw clenched in shame or anger. I couldn't tell which. I stood up slowly, heart pounding but calm. "I love you," I said, "but I won't be your caretaker anymore. Not emotionally, not financially, not in any way." I walked to the door. Mom whispered, "You're really leaving again?" "Yes," I said softly, "but this time I'm leaving for me." Weeks passed after that final dinner. The silence that used to suffocate me now felt like peace, the kind of quiet you earn after years of chaos. I didn't block my parents this time. I just stopped reaching out. Slowly, the calls dwindled. The guilt faded. And for the first time in my life, I felt something close to freedom. One afternoon, I got a text from Mom. Just a single line. "We're sorry. We didn't realize how much we were asking of you." I stared at it for a while, unsure if it was sincere or just another attempt to reel me back in. But it didn't matter. I didn't need their validation anymore. Healing wasn't about them changing. It was about me not needing them to. Lily eventually called too. Her voice was smaller, humbler. "I didn't know how much I was dumping on you," she said. "I thought you'd always be there." I listened quietly, then told her, "That's the problem, Lily. I always was." She didn't argue, just sighed. The sound of someone finally realizing what they lost. Back in my apartment, I looked around at my little world, the secondhand furniture, the half-watered plants, the photos I'd finally put up. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My peace, my boundaries, my life. Sometimes I still think about the baby, wondering if he'll grow up differently, maybe see through the family patterns I couldn't escape for so long. I hope he does, as I watched the sunset from my window. No golden light spilling over the floor. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not triumph. Not revenge. Just the quiet satisfaction of surviving what was meant to break me. Because sometimes, walking away isn't betrayal. It's the only way to prove you still belong to yourself.